Speaker, Michael Evans. Michael has been president of the Moynihan Station Development Corporation since 2013. As a subsidiary of New York State's Empire State Development Corporation, the Moynihan Station Development Corporation oversees the westward expansion of Manhattan's Pennsylvania Station into the landmark James A. Farley Post Office Building. Before heading the project, Michael served as Deputy Director for 2 years. I'm happy to welcome Michael to the podium.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you, members of PFAC. I'm happy to be here. It's an exciting moment on this project that has been many years in coming, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned and kind of where we are, which is on the cusp of delivering a great new civic space and transportation facility to the city and state of New York. This really has been a long time in coming, over 25 years since this project was first conceived of. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about what is different this time. The idea first came about as from an Amtrak planning exercise in the mid-1980s. It was then picked up by Senator Moynihan and championed throughout the 1990s and went through various fits and starts and iterations over the past decade. But now we are on the cusp of actually doing something real. Early work has already started in the building on creating the great train hall that the Senator envisioned. And there are some lessons that I think are applicable to the public and to the members of PFAC here and their constituencies. Importantly, we have focused on the transportation rationale in this project, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. As part of that, we have partnered very closely with the railroads and made sure that this project meets their needs and thinks about the long term, not just near-term needs. We've broken the project into achievable phases to deal with some of these challenges that mega projects face in terms of technical complexity, funding challenges, and overall jurisdictional and logistical challenges when you have an extremely complicated and expensive project in the middle of a place like New York City. And importantly, public sector leadership, kind of bringing all of these different pieces together and ensuring that this project can get delivered on schedule and on budget. Transportation rationale. This is important because for a long time, I think people just thought of this project as a historic renovation project, just making amends for the destruction of the original Penn Station, which was a terrible action in the mid-1960s. But as unfortunate as that was, and as beautiful as the Farley Building itself is, I think for a long time policymakers struggled with putting an enormous amount of public money into a project without a clearly defined transportation need or public need. So that need has only grown since the 80s when the project was first conceived of. Penn Station today is at full capacity, as anyone who has wandered through there knows. I used to say when you've wandered through there at rush hour, but I walked through there on my way here today at noontime, and it was completely congested and almost unnavigable. Back when Amtrak was created in the mid-1970s, there were about 600 trains a day going through the facility. That has more than doubled. And when the original Pennsylvania station was torn down at the low point of rail travel in this region, there were only about 200,000 people a day using the facility, and we are now over 700,000 people per day. It is the busiest transportation transit node in the Western Hemisphere by our research. You have two of the busiest commuter railroads in the entire country, Long Island Railroad and New Jersey Transit there, of course Amtrak, but then also two of the busiest subway stations in the entire network, bookending the existing facility. What does capacity mean, though? Because you've got to think about it in a couple of different ways, and that helps you think about what the solution should be. Well, first and foremost, the station is at full capacity in terms of its concourse space, and that is that congestion that you experience anytime you walk down there at almost any hour of the day now. where it is extremely hard to walk through. You have levels of service E and F throughout the facility. And that is important because that's one of the main pieces that the Moynihan Station project is going to try to solve. You also obviously have the problem of track and platform capacity because the station is the busiest in the Western Hemisphere. 21 tracks that were built 100 years ago, and at rush hour those are at full use with 2-minute headways on the commuter railroads. But even if you added 25 new tracks and platforms, you couldn't get a single additional train in there because of the tunnel capacity issues. We're on an island, of course, and you have to get trains through the tunnels under the Hudson River and the East River into the facility, and those are also at capacity. And why I mention these 3 different types of capacity challenges is because it's important to see Moynihan Station and Moynihan Train Hall and the Farley redevelopment not as a panacea for everything, but as the first step in a broader redevelopment of the entire complex. And that's part of what I mean when I talk about working with the railroads on a long-term vision to address long-term needs. So this is really the first piece in a longer-term vision that includes new tunnels under the Hudson River, that includes new tracks and platforms, and includes the renovation of the existing facility that currently is under Madison Square Garden. The demand is obviously already there. The station as it exists is currently unsuitable, but that demand is only growing. In the red here, you can see the Farley Building. At one time, it was essentially the western edge of Midtown. It has gone from being the western edge of Midtown to being the donut hole in the center of an entirely redeveloped Far West Side. In fact, the general Far West Side area, over 40 million square feet completed in the last 5 or 6 years in construction now or planned for the upcoming 5 or 6 years. To put that in perspective, that's roughly half of downtown Boston. So demand is only growing, and which means the transportation rationale for this project is becoming more and more urgent. A lot of people do not fully understand, though, how the Farley Building can fit into a solution for relieving the congestion at Penn Station. And that's because this is the view they have in their heads: Madison Square Garden, Penn Station underneath it, and this beautiful Beaux-Arts building to the west. What many people don't realize is that this building was a train station at one time. It just happened to be a train station for letters and parcels. The existing platforms of Penn Station run underneath this building. They have always run underneath this building, and that is how mail got up and down into the facility. The first or last car on the train would typically be the mail train. Mail would come out in bags and go up into the building through conveyor systems and freight elevators. And what is so incredible about this project is that we are going to take 100-year-old infrastructure, a beautiful historic gem, and adaptively reuse it to solve a 21st century problem and to create a 21st century transportation facility. We are going to do that in close coordination with our railroad partners, and the facility is going to be shared by Long Island Railroad and Amtrak. You are looking here at a plan view of the concourse level of the facility, and you can see on the northern side where the Long Island Railroad tracks and platforms are. There will be Long Island Railroad waiting and ticketing and information. There will be Amtrak ticketing and baggage handling and waiting on the south side and on the perimeter. And in fact, Amtrak will be moving all of its passenger-facing operations to the new facility. They use the long middle platforms of Penn Station, and so they see a real benefit to moving their operations here, which will allow for the future redevelopment of the space they currently exist in Penn Station, use in Penn Station. And of course, it will be a dynamic space. It will be a space that is taking the best lessons from around the world in terms of passenger amenities, retail, integrating all of that into an excellent experience for the traveling public that New York City and New York State residents will be proud of. Here are some of the things that the Farley Building allows us to achieve. We can address the concourse capacity issues of the current complex fundamentally by increasing concourse space by over 50%, increasing vertical circulation on the project by a third, by adding 30 new escalators, elevators, and stairs to the platforms. That means getting people on and off those platforms much quicker. I can give you a very real-world example. If you get off on the western end of the platforms today, in a rush hour situation where 2 double-decker trains are unloading, it can take 8 to 9 minutes, sometimes longer, to get off the platform because you have to walk all the way east under 8th Avenue and then up. When this project is completed, we will cut that in less than half the amount of time. So that means faster loading and unloading of trains, and it means, therefore, hopefully, more trains coming through the facility, which is the only way to add more trains into the facility without adding new tracks and platforms. We're definitely going to improve the passenger experience. You're going to see some very, hopefully, impressive renderings in a moment. We will have a facility flooded with natural light, a facility that celebrates the historic character of this building, and that ideally will be creating essentially a Grand Central Terminal on the west side. And importantly, it will also be supporting future ridership growth. So by moving Amtrak operations across the street, the rest of Penn Station will get reconfigured. There is already an early initiative announced by the governor back in September to improve the Long Island Railroad concourse in Penn Station, and that will be moving forward. And Amtrak has committed to a redevelopment timeline for its space once it leaves, in cooperation with Long Island Railroad and New Jersey Transit. So that's very exciting. And all of this will help service the far west side and ensure that there are transportation options that respond to that growing and dynamic part of the city. Project phasing. One of the challenges on these mega projects is there's a quote that a colleague of mine used that there are big bites and then there are bites that can choke you. And I think that that is one of the challenges on these projects. They become so complex, technically complex, jurisdictionally complex, the legal mechanisms that have to be put into place, the cost, that they become almost insurmountable. And so the public sector partners on this project have taken a different approach, a phased approach that has taken one of the more technically complicated parts of the project, driven that forward as a public sector-led project. It will be opening soon. It is phase 1 of the project. Phase 2 of the project, which I'll talk more about, is a public-private partnership, so using a different project delivery structure to deliver that element, which is more suitable. And then, of course, the redevelopment of the back of the building happening consistent with market demands. Phase 1 of the project is a lower concourse, 1 story beneath the grand staircase that everyone who's gone up 8th Avenue knows. It will help speed the loading and unloading of trains by adding a large portion of the stairs and elevators that I mentioned before, including new plazas and, for the first time, entrances into the entire Penn complex west of 8th Avenue where the Farley Building is. This will be open later this spring. And then phase 2 of the project, as I mentioned, taking the courtyard of the original Farley Building, which does have a roof structure over it, was originally the sorting room of the building, and turning that into a 3-story atrium space and grand train hall for Long Island Railroad and Amtrak. And then redeveloping the rest of this 1.4 million square foot facility, which is essentially half of the Empire State Building but laying on its side. It is an enormous complex, and one that, because of the redevelopment on the west side, has gone from being a challenging development prospect to one that is ripe economic opportunity for the private sector, and therefore making this a real public-private partnership. We'll see some images in a moment, but this is one of the great shots of the future train hall. We are saving the historic trusses that held up the original roof structure and putting a new skylight system on the historic truss structure. And last, we'll talk a little bit about public sector leadership and where we are in the process for completing the train hall that you've just seen an image of. In January of 2016, Governor Cuomo announced an RFP for a developer-builder team and was very clear about the need to have strict delivery timelines, a fixed price contract, and a proven track record of success. Responses were received in April of 2016, and a team was designated by the governor in September of 2016, designated by Empire State Development, announced by the governor in September of 2016. The selected developer-builder team, Related and Vornado, a joint venture of these two developers, partnered with their builder Skanska, supported by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill as the architect of record. And importantly, key contract terms: a fixed price contract for the construction management and oversight responsibility by the developer team so that they will deliver the train hall for the public as part of this public-private partnership, a completion guarantee for that work, and importantly a 30% MWBE goal, which is a very important for the state of New York and for the governor personally. The key financials, which have been public for some time, $1.264 billion is the fixed price construction contract, project management and other costs, including contingencies, at $330 million, for a total of approximately $1.6 billion. And that is being funded by both an initial payment from the developer joint venture, as well as annual payments in lieu of taxes, which will be financed by Empire State Development, a contribution from Empire State Development, which was in the budget that was recently passed, and a combination of grants and other support from Amtrak, Long Island Railroad, the Port Authority, and our federal partners. Project timeline, again, September, designation of the team. The procurement process requested an early work schedule to ensure the most aggressive schedule as possible on the project, and that work began in January of 2017. A partial notice to proceed for additional work was given in February, and in April, as of earlier this week, the Empire State Board of Directors and the PACB have authorized the overall commercial transaction and major construction, which will begin shortly. The schedule is for substantial completion in late 2020. And that concludes the bulk of my presentation. I will just end with a couple more images of the train hall and then answer any questions that the PFAC members may have.